Hey guys, what's good? Welcome back to JDB Selects. Round 22 in the books. What a boring old round. No Warriors games. I mean, come on. Nah, just kidding. It was actually a great round of footy. Round 23 also looks to be full of great matchups. Dare I jinx it and say a relatively easier round to tip than the previous few weeks, but we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But before we do get stuck into my tips for round 23, let's, as always, look back at how we did last week. Last week we tipped 6 out of 8 games. For those of you that saw my original video where I tipped the Dragons, you can go back and check the pinned comment on that video that I did change to the Sea Eagles well before the game started on Thursday night. So 6 out of 8 is not a bad result. In hindsight, obviously maybe should have taken the Knights against the top 4 frauds in the Raiders, but it is what it is. And then obviously I was never going to take the Titans to beat the Cowboys, but full credit to the Gold Coast. Great result, well fought, gritty win. Now I know we are pretty much done for 2023, but if you don't know by now, we do have a subscribers tipping comp running. All the details to join are shown on screen. We will have a new comp running next season, so just keep an eye out on the channel's social pages or on different videos for the details to join if you want to get stuck in from round 1 next year. And speaking of the tipping comp, Abdullah retains top spot on the ladder after 22 rounds, tied with Jared 68 on 111 points, but just ahead on margin. We're getting down to the sticky end of the season now, so we'll have to wait and see if Abdullah can hold off the charge from everyone below him. But good luck to you, Abdullah, good luck to you, Jared 68, and good luck to everyone else in the tipping comp, or just in general with your tips this week. Let's get stuck into my personal tips for round 23. Alright, round 23 gets underway on Thursday night with the 14th placed Sydney Roosters taking on the 10th placed Manly Sea Eagles at the SCG. Starting first with the Roosters' hopes of making a late run into the 8 were basically extinguished when they went down to the Broncos 32 points to 10 to kick off round 22. The Chooks came out of the gates firing, as they have often done, with their big boys initially winning the contest through the middle before fading away after 10 minutes and getting outworked. They hardly troubled Brisbane's line and were flat-footed on attack, with no one seemingly putting their hand up for the ball, constantly going sideways. Their halves combination of Keary and Smith really lack that strong kicking game, and it's hurting the Roosters big time at both ends of the field. And when you couple that with a 66% completion rate, and at least 2 tries that the bunker or referee denied the Broncos, I think the Roosters can count themselves lucky that they only lost by 22 points. In terms of injuries, Egan Butcher was unable to return after failing his HIA and may be in doubt this week given his history. And as for the Sea Eagles, Manly managed to give DCE a win in his 300th game, and in doing so snapped a 20-year hoodoo against the Dragons in Wollongong, securing a narrow 24 to 18 point win. The Sea Eagles survived an early onslaught and to their credit only conceded 1 try before scoring a few of their own. It was a far from convincing performance against the Dragon side renowned for leaking points, but a crucial sin bin call swung all momentum back in their favour, and although they didn't capitalise on it to the fullest, they did just enough to secure the 2 points. They will likely be without Christian Tuipulotu this week after he suffered a knee injury, but they are expecting Ben Trbojevic to be available. Looking at the two sides head to head, there aren't any clear stats here, and these two sides only met just 5 rounds ago, with the Sea Eagles defending their way to a 2-point victory at home. The Roosters have, however, won 3 straight against the Sea Eagles at the SCG. As always, the Thursday games are super important with the margins, and this is another tough one to tip, but I am going to back the Roosters here. I think they were unlucky to be beaten by Manly a few weeks back, and now that Manly are missing a decent chunk of their middle forwards, I think the Roosters should be able to get revenge. Roosters 1-12. Kicking off the first of 2 games on Friday, it's the 12th placed Gold Coast Titans playing host to the 3rd placed NZ Warriors at Cbus Super Stadium. Starting first with the Titans, the Gold Coast managed to spring a massive upset in the 4X Derby to close out round 22, beating the North Queensland Cowboys 22 points to 13. It was a really impressive performance, with the Titans seemingly more enthused than the Cowboys and showing a ton of resolve on defense. Jaden Campbell brings so much spark to their side and made a massive difference this week, given more minutes than normal with AJ Brimson dealing with an abdominal issue. The win keeps the Titans' hopes for a top 8 finish alive and will no doubt give them a ton of confidence going into the final month of the regular season. And as for the Warriors, they will be fresh off their final bye of the year, but the week prior managed to see off a late charge from the Canberra Raiders with a Sean Johnson field goal in Golden Point getting them across the line, 21 points to 20. Personally, I thought the Warriors were outplayed through the middle third, but showed great defensive resolve to hold the Raiders out for as long as they did. Their defense and composure, not only in this game, but the entire season, has been such a dramatic turnaround from the Warriors of old. And although winning by 30 plus is great, I think they will take a lot more out of a game like that, where they had to hold their nerve, trust their processes, and really earn that 2 points. The bye also couldn't have come at a better time, with Captain Tohu Harris only playing limited minutes as he continues to deal with a knee injury. But this week he should take his place in the side, while Jazz Tavanga is also expected to be available for selection this week. Looking at the two sides head to head, the Titans have actually won 4 of the past 5, including 3 straight. They've also won 3 straight at home against the Warriors. But I am blindly going to use my bias and not follow those stats and take the Warriors here 13 plus. The Warriors will be coming off a bye, while the Titans will just have that 5-day turnaround. I think SJ will also be able to find plenty of holes in the Titans' defense. And I also think that the Warriors' middles should be able to dominate the smaller Titans pack, especially without Tino there. And if the Warriors do score a few early, they should run away with it. And the final game on Friday has the first placed Penrith Panthers taking on the 4th placed Melbourne Storm at Bluebet Stadium. Starting first with the Panthers did what the Panthers do, completely shutting down the Cronulla Sharks at home 28 points to 0. It's funny, right? I said to my partner just before the game started that I could probably write my recap without even watching the game, because you just know what the Panthers are going to do. Defend their line 99% of the time, march upfield off the back of their outside men, and score points with ease, and that's pretty much exactly what happened on the weekend. I thought Luai and Cleary were so good, with both players coming up with incredible plays and complementing each other perfectly. They really are just a classy football team, and they're honestly leagues and leagues above so many other clubs. And as for the Storm, Melbourne bounced back in true Storm fashion with a dominant 46-16 point win over the Parramatta Eels to celebrate their club's 25th anniversary. The Storm were under the pump early before finding their groove and running riot. Last week I touched on how quiet Jerome Hughes has been recently, but he was anything but last week, getting his hands on the ball regularly and having a huge impact, recording 4 try assists, 4 line break assists, and scoring 1 of his own. Munster and Grant were also back to their best and toyed with the exhausted Eels pack, but like I've said all season, it's so hard to gauge the Storm this year as they've been extremely hot and cold, but maybe that loss to the Newcastle Knights gave them that timely rev up leading into the finals. In terms of injuries, Nelson Asafa-Solomona may be available to play this week, and I think it would be a massive inclusion for the Storm when they are facing the 2-time defending premiers. Looking at the two sides head to head, they met just 5 rounds ago, with the Panthers blowing the Storm away late in the second half, 34 points to 16. The Panthers, they have won 3 of the last 4. However, Melbourne have a great record over the Panthers in Sydney, winning 8 of the last 10 games. I am going to back the Panthers here by 1 to 12 points. I know the Panthers did thrash the Storm not that long ago, but I do want to give the Storm some respect after what they showed last week, and I have no doubt the Storm will come out firing, wanting to right their wrongs, but I do still think the Panthers will be too strong. Now, kicking off the Super Saturday triple header, we have the 8th placed North Queensland Cowboys taking on the 2nd placed Brisbane Broncos at Queensland Country Bank Stadium in Townsville. Starting first with the Cowboys, North Queensland were unable to secure their 7th straight win, going down to the Gold Coast Titans 22 points to 13. I thought the Cowboys looked like they did at the start of the season, seemingly fatigued, and were outworked by the Titans across the park and failed to score a point in the final 66 minutes of the match. The loss was compounded by Val Holmes being sin-binned for the 2nd week in a row, and he will likely be handed a short suspension as a result. The Cowboys had plenty of chances to score but couldn't ice them, and clearly started to feel the pressure and couldn't handle the heat. The Cowboys will be hoping to prove themselves this week against one of the competition's strongest sides in the Broncos, and it will be a tall task given the players who are unavailable. And as for the Broncos, Brisbane staked their claim as premiership contenders with a clinical 32-10 point win over the Sydney Roosters. The Broncos weathered the storm early before taking over and never looked back, with standout performances from Haas, Palacia and Carrigan running riot, with Carrigan even bagging his first NRL 4-pointer. Reynolds' kicking game was pinpoint perfect, turning the ball over deep in Roosters territory, forcing the Roosters to do it tough. The Broncos were unlucky not to have at least another 2 tries, with Grant Atkins coming up with a try saver of his own, and a contentious offside call on Katoni Staggs denying him a second. If I'm being honest, I've been pretty critical of the Broncos this year, but my word, they have such a balanced roster with strike power in almost every position, and when you couple that with the calmness and poise of Adam Reynolds, they really are a massive chance against any side come the finals. And in terms of injuries, Jesse Arthurs and Brendan Paikura are expected to be back on deck this week. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, geez, there's so many great stats for this one. They met earlier this year at the start of the year, back in round 2, with the Broncos securing a 28-16 point win. However, the Cowboys, they've won 6 straight at home, and they've also won 8 of the past 11 games against the Broncos at home. And on the other hand, the Broncos are on a 4-game winning streak and have won 4 of the past 6 games against the Cowboys. Should be a great game this. I think both sides have a lot to prove in this one, but I am going to back the Broncos here by 1 to 12 points. I think they have one of the form sides of the competition and should be too strong for a Cowboys side missing troops and hurting from last week's loss. Moving now to the second game on Saturday, we have the 13th placed Redcliffe Dolphins taking on the 9th placed Newcastle Knights at Optus Stadium over in Perth. Starting first with the Dolphins, the Finns almost managed to pull victory from the jaws of defeat, only to come up an agonising 1 point short against the Bulldogs, 23 points to 22. The Dolphins started strong and then began to come up with unforced errors, allowing the Dogs back into it. The Bulldogs could have easily been ahead by more, but through their own unforced errors, the Dolphins were still in with a chance. I thought the Finns lacked a bit of desire and effort in the second half, but credit to Wayne Bennett, the addition of Anthony Milford really lifted them, and then when he crashed over in the 78th minute, it looked like they'd got it done. But Isako unfortunately missed the conversion and they fell just short. The loss is also compounded by the fact the Dolphins lost both Ewan Aiken and Lemuelu. Both players will be in doubt for this week's game. And as for the Knights, Newcastle extended their winning streak to 4 with an impressive 28-6 point win over the Canberra Raiders. Impressively, the Knights only had 12 tackles in the Raiders' 20 compared to the Raiders who had 40, but came up with some brilliant long-range plays with Ponga, Crossland and Gagai playing starring roles. If I had to be critical of the Knights' performance, they did only complete at 71% and came up with 14 errors, which normally comes back to bite them, but they met little resistance from Canberra and were rock solid in defence. They showed unbelievable effort, clearly carrying a lot of confidence after downing the Storm last week, and are now a genuine chance of sneaking into the 8, with the run home including the Bulldogs, Dragons and Dolphins. I think Ponga's choice to walk away from Origin this year has done wonders for not only him personally, but also the Knights, who have reaped the rewards and are now finally clicking into gear at the right time of the year. Looking at the two sides head to head, the Knights are yet to beat the Dolphins. They went down to the Dolphins 36 points to 20 back in round 3, but both sides have changed dramatically since then. This will also be the first time that either side has played at Optus Stadium. Should be pretty straightforward this one. I'm going to take the Knights by 13 plus. I think the Knights are flying at the moment and are full of belief and have a full strength squad, while the Dolphins are they're in that slump at the moment, and with constant injuries and positional changes, I just don't see them getting past the Knights here. And the final game on Saturday is the last of the double header over there in Perth. It's the 6th placed South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the 5th placed Cronulla Sharks at Optus Stadium. Starting first with the Rabbitohs, South Sydney moved back inside the 8 with a rather unconvincing 32-18 point victory over the West Tigers. The Bunnies were far from their best, only completing at 65% in the first half, but still managed to find plenty of points, including yet another hat-trick for Alex Johnston. Souths really do look a different side with Latrell Mitchell back on deck, and just his presence on attack creates so much doubt in their opponent's mind, which frees up their outside men and leaves defensive lines almost frozen and confused. And while a win is a win, Souths still need to find some improvements if they are to make a run for the premiership, but having Latrell Mitchell fit, happy and healthy will go a long way for both their sides' confidence and their performances on the field. And as for the Sharks, Cronulla were held scoreless for the first time since 2021, getting completely shut out by the Panthers, 28 points to 0. It was all one-way traffic, with the Sharks only seeing 40% of the ball, completing at just 66% and having only 10 tackles inside the Panthers' 20. It didn't help that they lost Ronaldo Mulitalo pre-game and then Will Kennedy in the 5th minute, which obviously forced positional changes, but even then it was a really lackluster performance. The lone highlight for the Sharkies was Cam McInnes setting a new NRL record with 84 tackles in a match, an incredible effort. Cronulla now find themselves slipping further and further down the ladder each week, and with multiple players out for the remainder of the season and a tough few games to finish, they really do have their work cut out for them. Looking at the two sides head to head, Souths beat the Sharks earlier this year, 27 points to 18, but keep in mind that Cronulla were without Nico Hines in that one. The Rabbitohs have also won 4 of the last 5, however Souths have lost their only other game at Optus Stadium, and that was at the hands of the Warriors back in 2018, while this will be the Sharks' first game at the stadium. Wow, an absolute blockbuster to wind things up on Saturday. Tough one to tip for sure, but I'm going to lean the side of the Rabbitohs here by 1 to 12 points. I think with Latrell back in the side, they do look a lot more dangerous, and they're only going to get better as he gets more game time under his belt. Whereas the Sharks now with Kennedy out and everything that's going on there, I think the Bunnies can get it done, but I'm not confident about that. So good luck with your tip on this one, but for me, Rabbitohs 1 to 12. Moving now to the first of 2 Sunday fixtures, starting first with the 11th placed Parramatta Eels taking on the 16th placed St. George Illawarra Dragons at CommBank Stadium. Starting first with the Eels, Parramatta went down to the Storm for the second time this season, 48 points to 16. The Eels only allowed Melbourne a single set in the first 10 minutes before getting picked apart by the Storm's halves. Parramatta were unable to deal with the pace of Melbourne around the ruck and lacked through the middles and were stripped on the edges. The good news for Eels fans though is that Dylan Brown makes his return from suspension this week, which should help their offense massively, and I think he's pretty sound defensively too, and what better opposition for him to come back against than the Dragons. And as for the Dragons, well, St. George couldn't continue their 20-year dominance over Manly in Wollongong, losing 24 points to 18. The Dragons were all over the Sea Eagles early and then fell away in the middle stages of the match before attempting another second half fight back, as they so often do. The big turning point in that match was the contentious hip drop tackle which saw Jack DeBellin sin-binned, and that really took the wind out of the Dragons' sails. To their credit though, they didn't concede while they were a man down, and they even scored one themselves. But they couldn't do enough with the time left on the clock. In terms of injuries, Ben Murdoch-Masila and Viliami Fafita are expected back, or at least to be available for selection this week. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Dragons have won 2 of the past 3, and they've even won 2 of the past 3 games against the Eels at CommBank, but the Eels, they've won 10 of the past 13 overall. I do like the Eels here, so I am going to take Parramatta 13+. I think the return of Dylan Brown is massive for Parramatta. And given what they dished up against the Storm last week, I think they'll come out firing at home. And the final game of round 23 has the 5th placed Canberra Raiders hosting the last placed West Tigers at GIO Stadium in the nation's capital. Starting first with the Raiders, Canberra were embarrassed by the Newcastle Knights in front of their home fans, getting thumped 28 points to 6. The Raiders had no answers for the Knights' pace, getting burnt out wide and missing far too many tackles and coming up with far too many errors. I thought Fogarty was really quiet, and I touched on last week that if the Raiders were to win, Fogarty had to have a big presence, which he didn't. He hardly troubled the Knights under the high ball, and their normally robust forward pack couldn't gain any momentum. It was a really lackluster performance, and they'll need to find a way to bounce back quickly, because if they dish up a few more like that at this end of the season, they could easily find themselves outside the 8, especially given their negative points difference. And as for the Tigers, they remain anchored to the bottom of the NRL ladder after suffering another loss, this time at the hands of the South Sydney Rabbitohs, 32 points to 18. Their intent was clear from the opening whistle, playing a very expansive attacking style game, but they lacked the execution and discipline, only completing at 55% and scoring off the back of a Rabbitohs error in the first 40. To their credit though, it was a much improved second half with Api Coruscant leading from the front and coming up with some huge momentum shifting plays. But the Tigers were unable to withstand the sustained pressure from South and eventually caved. Dane Laurie was unable to finish the game with what looked like an ankle injury and may be in doubt this week, while Stefano Utaikamanu also battled through a knee injury, but he did finish that game on the field. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Raiders have won 10 of the last 11 games. That includes 6 straight. They've also won 4 of the past 5 games in Canberra. These two sides also met earlier this season in round 14, with the Raiders sneaking a 1-point win thanks to a late penalty goal from Jamal Fogarty. Ooh, good one to finish the round, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the Tigers 1 to 12. I think my due meter, the Tigers are due a win, and I really want them to get it out of the way before they play the Warriors next week. And the Tigers, they've been competitive against some really good opposition this year. And in my opinion, I'm sorry Raiders fans, I think you are top 4 frauds. So why not go for the underdog on a Sunday? Tigers 1 to 12. Alright, bang. And just like that, another week in the books. In summary, I am taking the Roosters 1 to 12, the Warriors 13+, the Panthers and the Broncos 1 to 12, Knights 13+, Rabbitohs 1 to 12, Parramatta 13+, and the mighty West Tigers 1-12. Thank you guys as always for watching. If you do appreciate and enjoy these videos, leave a like on them, hit subscribe if you aren't subscribed. Let me know who you're tipping in the comments below. I do try and respond to most comments, so feel free to ask questions, leave thoughts, predictions, all that good stuff, and I'll try and get back to you. But thank you as always. I'll see you in the next one.